Welcome to Cross Platform Podcast, where we discuss how to solve productivity problems across platforms. I'm Augusto Pinaud,
And I'm Art Gelwicks.
and we are on the Tips of the Week episode. And in the Tips of the Week, we try to bring things, tips, and tools or gadgets that we use to increase our productivity. So today we are going to start. Art's going to start talking to us about copy notes from notes to Notion.
So, one of the things, if you watch the Unpacked event, they spent actually a significant amount of time talking about Samsung Notes, which is their digital ink note taking tool. It's been around for a
Mhm.
while, it used to be called S Note. They have gone through a concerted effort of one, making it more powerful, two, making it available on more devices. So, for example, you can use it on your tablet, on your phone, and you can use it on your Windows machine. And it's all synchronized through OneDrive in the cloud. So it's a very nice platform that they've put together for this digital inking. The downside is that I've been keeping my notes in Notion. Well, Notion doesn't support digital ink by any stretch of the imagination. So I had to figure out a way to get the notes that I'm taking by hand, which I find are really easy to capture using Samsung Notes, and get them over to Notion. And it turns out that it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be, because one of the options that you have on the Android side is the ability to share those Samsung Notes. So you take the notes down, you go up and you tap on share, and then you tell it the note. It gives you options as to what format you want to share that note in. One of them is a Samsung Note, which is their proprietary format. But if you look down the list, there's an option for an image file. And then you can say, share that image to Notion. Well, that immediately pops up the Notion, gives you the Notion pop up and says, okay, what page do you want to put this on? What's really nice about this is not only does it get dropped in as an image into that Notion page, but it also will create an individual image for each page in that note, because by design, the Samsung Notes can be multi-page notes. So it automatically throws all those images into a Notion note. You can resize them, you can lay them out next to each other. Now, the only thing it doesn't do is OneNote, for example, will turn the handwritten text into OCR searchable text in the background. Notion doesn't do anything like that. But if you're not trying to use a digital ink tool as your organizing tool and you're just trying to use it as your capture tool, this seems to be a really efficient way to do it. And I'm curious, on the iPad side of the house, do you find that when you're taking digital ink notes, do you leave them in that digital ink tool or do you move them to some other tool?
So I take all my digital notes on a piece of software called Good Notes. Okay.
Okay.
And then from Good Notes, I can export to basically anywhere that I want. After I process the notes, it's rare that I keep handwritten notes, mostly because my handwriting is really limited to drawing, mostly because nobody can read that thing after that. After I finish, it's hard to read. So it is notes that I take in the meetings, and I need to process them pretty quick. And when I process, I Good Notes has a feature that I can select and convert to text, and it do a decent job. I have learned that I need to copy the sheet and then do the thing, so I can go back to my, let's call it handwriting, to be kind with me,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and translate and make notes typing, and then that result is what I archive. Unless there are drawings on them, it's rare that I keep them after I process them, mostly because, again, after a week there is no way I will remember the context of what I was trying to write in there.
And that's really the problem I get into with the digital ink part. And it's ironic, it's the same problem I have with analog. I can take the notes very efficiently in digital ink. I can do whatever diagrams, I can capture things very
Mhm.
fast, I can focus on what I'm doing. It's leveraging the notes after the fact that becomes the problem. turning them into to-do items, turning them into referenceable text. That's an uphill climb. Now, OneNote's always been relatively good at that. For example, I can take a handwritten block, assign a to-do task to it, but it doesn't do basic things like reminders. So, no, you take one step forward or two steps forward, you take one step back on every one of these tools in your platform. And you have to decide, as we've talked about in the past, what is going to be your tool for a particular type of work, and then how do you use that tool all the time?
Yeah.
Because every time you have to bypass that, I don't know, maybe it's
Yeah.
just me,
One thing
but I
that I
introduce problems.
do, that thing that I do, and that I advise to clients to do during the day is book time to processing those things. And in many times it's easier for clients to book them early in the morning than late at the day, because there are two things that happen. One, you're brain dead. Okay, at the end of you went in 8 meetings, you're brain dead. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I told them is make it fun. Doesn't matter if the content of the notes is the most dreaded thing. Okay, make it fun. So if you can make it at home, well, now to get some music, get some glass of wine or whatever, okay, a cup of tea, and process the notes in a fun environment. Because even if the notes are the most dreaded notes, your brain, relaxing the brain, will allows you
Mm-hmm.
to remember more about the notes, and more importantly, the why you take that note, then that you can expand it and create better notes. That comes into uh, so that's tip one. That tip require that you type faster, okay? Because if you type less than 80 words per minute, it's going to take you too long. That said, I had a client, and I have shared this story. I don't know if I've shared it here in the show, but I have shared it before. I had a client that we were having this discussion, and I told him that, and his response was, I am not going to learn to type. There is no way I'm going to do this. And he made me get creative. And what I discovered with him in particular is we did not make him type. We I made him get a second device so he can dictate directly into the device.
Okay.
So he used Madam A on the keyboard, or the Apple Dictate and the Google Dictate. Doesn't matter which one you use, okay? But because he's not in a hurry, he can dictate slower, okay? And then he can see what is coming on the screen.
Right.
And what is happened to this particular client is that his notes now are awesome, because as he is dictating, okay, well, we went to the show and we discussed the tips of the week, and then Art went to the Samsung Notion notes on Notion, and then I discussed about my handwritten and how I do the handwritten, and then he said, note after the fact, and then he can dump new ideas that he's getting processing those notes without typing. And basically, because he's talking, he don't feel that it's taking really long time, but it's giving him a second life of that meeting that for him as an executive has been priceless.
I think this is one of the things we're going to have to explore in another show is effectively using our notes. I mean, we've talked about it in other
I love
places.
that. Let's capture that for another Wednesday.
I just took a note of that. That kind of thing. I mean, it's easy enough to take notes, doing something worthwhile with them, deconstructing them after the fact is a whole different exercise.
Yeah.
And that's
that's an exercise that I think require two devices.
Yeah, actually, I would be inclined to agree. You need to be able to, well, I don't know if I would say, well, let me think. Yeah, probably. Because if you're trying to process your notes on the same device you took them, it often requires you to bounce around between apps. So, for example, like in my case, between Samsung Notes and Notion. So I'm going back and forth to process the notes, whether I leave it as a text note or if I leave it as a handwritten note. That's a different choice. But how I'm going to identify this is a to-do item, or this is a reference note, or this is a thing for future discovery. How do I put it into a data structure? Because I've got a data table that helps me organize certain things. These are all part of that processing exercise, which, you're right, requires a different set of thought process. And if you can go through and process your notes in a way that's going to make that a little bit more streamlined, then that'll work regardless of whether, we're talking about inking, if it's digital ink or if it's actual paper ink, sitting down and going through your notes and capturing this. The upside is, and this is, I don't want to get off track here, but the upside of this is that if you process your notes properly, you don't have to keep the handwritten ones. You don't have to go through that struggle of keeping this library of handwritten notes that you have to go back and reread to find things. You can go through and do different organizational pieces. Like I said, we'll talk about this in a future show, but one of the tricks I do with handwritten notes on the digital side all the time is I'll use the lasso tool to actually highlight sections of the text and move it around. So after the fact, I'll create a new header and move sections of text to there so that they're more organized because they're digital. I can't do that on paper. That just doesn't work. But on digital, I do have the flexibility to kind of recreate the notes.
Right.
As long as I've written them in a way that lends for that.
Yeah.
So you've got two interesting tips.
So I got
here,
a couple
I'll
of
finish
things.
off with mine.
This thing is called Hold Me, and for the people who are just listening to the podcast, I will advise to go at the beginning. But it's basically a curve. I don't know. This is a 30 degrees curve, and it's a magnet, so you put a little metal plate on the back of your laptop or the iPad, and a little plate in the back of the phone, and now you can attach the back of the phone to the tablet or the app and give you two screens. Really useful. I stopped having many of the Zoom calls on anywhere else that is not the phone, and the reason is because I can put it on top of that and watch. Number one, I'm not watching anymore, looking down on the screen of the laptop, and that has improved significantly my neck pain because now I'm watching straight because the phone is on the top of your laptop. Also, that allows me to take better notes because now what I have under is notes and reference, and I can be focusing on the conference call that I am and taking better notes on the bottom, and that has really been a life-changing toy for me.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really useful to have that. I have a wireless charging stand that my phone sits parked on, but it's down and off to the side from my normal display, so it's not as intuitive as having it connected right there and an extended piece. And just to harken back to previous conversations, one of the things that Samsung demonstrated today, or at least called attention to, related to their S8 tablets, is the ability to use a phone as a palette for the tablet. So if you're using the tablet to do graphic design work, for example, all the controls for that tablet can be moved to the phone so that you can use it as basically your painter's palette and then go and draw without having to chew up part of your screen real estate on your tablet for your controls and tools. It was an interesting approach. Yep. So my last tip that I have for today is one that has been around forever, but I don't know that necessarily everybody uses it or even is aware of it. So if you're reading something, let's say you're reading an article on the internet, and there's a term that you're not familiar with or something along that line, and you want to look it up, often what we'll do is we'll open a new tab, we'll go to Google, we'll type it in, and that's great. But if you go in, highlight whatever it is you want to search for, and then right-click on it, in almost every browser, you'll have an option that allows you to search for that particular highlighted phrase. And it will open a new tab for you, and it will do a search of that item right away. It's no keyboard involved. It makes it very easy and very intuitive. A little extra for that is if you're using Microsoft Edge as your browser, you have an option to do the search in a sidebar. So it keeps your article first and foremost on your page, doesn't open another tab. It just puts the search results in a right-hand sidebar and allows you to keep working with what you're working. So highlight and right-click. definitely a great way to be able to go through and look up something very quickly to keep things in flow, working less.
Yeah. So the second tip I have is somebody asked me, so I don't understand. You have iOS devices. Why you mention and you have mentioned that your recording device is an Android device? Okay, and it's true. I video video podcast and recording happen all on a tablet, and I said on an recent episode, that I just upgrade that one of 10.1 from a 13 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Why an Android instead of an iPad or a Mac? And the reason is that machine has a one use. And being an Android allows me to do two things. One, there is zero temptation for me to put all the notifications and all the work. So it works for
Mm-hmm.
one thing. And when you do recording, podcast, videos, and those things, all those taxing on the system, software notifications are really annoying for recording. You're in the middle of the thing and ting, and you ruin that. With this device, there is zero temptation for me to go, okay, I geek out. I have geek out a couple of things, but there is nothing installed other than the things for me to do this job. And the reason that is important is we tend to think, hey, why should I get this other device to do one thing? And the
Mm-hmm.
answer in many cases to me is yes. I had for many years, a long time ago, I had an iPod. I had a fun iPhone, but I also had an iPod because I wanted to have more music than what the phone allowed me, and I wanted to have different kind of things on the phone. So that iPod was really for me to have all my collection that I did not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily want it to have on my phone. So we tend to think, well, is that a waste or is not a waste? Well, I cannot answer that question for you, but what I can answer the question is if you have or you feel that you need a device for a specific use that is going to be consistent, yes, having that device, even if it's in my case an Android, so I don't have the temptation to connect it with everything else, it is a good decision.
And you're absolutely right. There is a huge amount of value to not junking up a particular device to try and make it be all things. I have found that I get into that habit pretty bad as soon as I get a new device and add it into the mix. I'm like, can this be the primary device? Can I do everything here? And it's not even that it's going to be the primary. It's like, well, can I do that? It's a trial. It's a new experiment. It's something, it's a little
It's a toy.
endorphin
It's
or
a new toy.
yeah, exactly. So, for example, video editing on my phone. Can I do it? Sure. Should I do it? No, but I can. And if hard pressed to, I would be able to. Can I take notes on my phone? Absolutely. Should I do it all the time? Well, that's up in the air. That's a pretty big debate because of how I take notes and because of how it works. It's a different beast. So we have to really think about from not only from our device perspective, but also from just how things fit into our world and how we normally behave with them. Being able to say that maybe this thing's job is to do just this, use the right tool for the job, then and we've talked about this, then it's going to work. That's what I'm going to use to do that job. And I can parallel it to more manually focused activities. You get the right hammer to drive the right nails. You don't use a hammer for your screws and for your lag bolts and everything else when you're building something. You could, but you shouldn't because it's not efficient, it's not effective, and ultimately you're not going to get the same quality out of it that you would have otherwise. So I like the idea that you do that. I like the idea that you have a dedicated device for that and it handles that issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that people should consider is that list of things that they need to do, identifying where they're going to do it, and this is the thing that most people miss out on, identify what you're not going to be able to do while you're doing that thing. So for example, if you're using your Android device to record your video cast, you can't use that thing to take notes at the same time effectively.
Correct.
You're just asking for trouble. So you have to recognize that if that Android device is your primary note-taking tool the rest of the time, you've set up an opportunity where you're not going to be able to use it effectively as part of your platform. And that just asks for trouble. So thinking about that can go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think we've hit pretty much everything on our list.
Well, you have the right click to search.
Well, I covered that a little bit ago, and that was
Beautiful.
that was highlighting and right click. And I'm a big fan of that. I have to say, I've started to use more and more of the right click menu functions.
Uh-huh.
So if you're not using them, and let's say, for example, on the Windows side, if you're using regular Chrome versus Edge, Chrome has some nice right-click functions when you go in and work on any web page. If you mouse over a link and you right-click on it, you can copy the link address. You can send the link, to devices, depending on your item, and you'll often find added into that quick menu a bunch of other extensions depending on what you've added into the browser. So, like for mine, for example, I've got extensions in there that allow me to save a link to Google Drive and save it to Google Keep and send it to Pocket and send it to To-Do List. Those are all singular right-click items, which make it really useful. When I look at something like Edge, Edge has even that much more. Edge has functionality like being able to create a QR code for the page I'm looking at, sending the page to a specific device, but being able to drop it into a collection or drop it into an immersive reader. So if you haven't tried right-clicking around in your browser, that's absolutely worth the exercise right there, because I guarantee you'll find at least a couple of things that are going to make life a little easier.
Yep. So with this, we have come to the end of the show. Follow us where you like to listen to podcasts, like us, or subscribe to us and leave us a review. You can also interact with us in personalproductivity.club. We have a channel for cross-platform there. We are Augusto Pinaud and Art Gelwicks, and see you next time from your favorite device.